Humans feel intense desire, but they do not know for what, for it is being they desire, a beingness of which they feel deprived, and which, it seems to them, others have. This explains why economic growth, more than pure wealth, is the key to the functioning of our society, for it provides each of us with the hope that we can rise above our present condition, even though this dream remains elusive. The idea of progress has been subject to serious misunderstandings throughout history. The Enlightenment, which introduced the idea in the 18th century, made progress a moral value, one of autonomy and freedom, using it to critique the hierarchical order of the ancien régime. The Industrial Revolution, which unfolded in Europe over the course of the 19th century, transformed that ideal into a promise of material progress. Yet in doing so, it also established a society that completely turned its back on Enlightenment ideals. Engineers drove out priests, but industrial society remained just as hierarchical as before. In the family and in the factory, the vertical structure of society continued to dominate. In the 20th century, Fordism and the assembly line, the standard for the industrial world, retained the age-old pyramidal organizational structure. In the private sphere, it was not until 1965 that a woman in France could open a bank account without her husband's permission. Some 2 centuries after the French Revolution, she was still under his guardianship when it came to most of the legal acts that affected her. For women, as for many other social groups, the idea of autonomy and freedom was dead on arrival. It is only in the last few decades that the remaining vestiges of the ancien régime have finally disappeared. Workers no longer manipulate physical objects, agricultural or industrial, but rather the flow of information. According to the sociologist Ronald Inglehart, creativity is replacing authority as the core value. In his view, Enlightenment ideas are finally prevailing. Autonomy and self-direction are becoming the standard of our modernity. Sadly, it is not so simple. The new digital economy is setting in place a totally disruptive, zero-cost production model, bringing in new forms of insecurity. Inexpensive software takes over routine tasks, whatever their level of sophistication, from playing chess to dispensing cash to trading on the stock market. This race against machines creates a nervous strain that is reaching new heights. As the economists David Blanchflower and Andrew Oswald have shown, mental stress in the workplace has increased over the years. To borrow an expression from the psychoanalyst Pierre Legendre, modern man lives above his psychological means. Creativity, when it becomes a business imperative, loses much of its moral benefit. Inglehart, furthermore, repeats Keynes's error when he concludes that a post-materialist world, freed from need, is now at hand. The quest for economic growth is still very much there, for the reasons explained by the Easterlin paradox. But digital society is marked by a paradox of its own. The technological prospects it heralds have never looked so bright, yet the prospects for growth have never been so disappointing. We seem to be experiencing an industrial revolution without growth. In the United States, 90% of the population has seen no growth in purchasing power over the last 30 years. In France, annual per capita growth has dropped steadily from 3% in the 1970s to 2% and then 1% in the following decades, and down to almost 0 in the last 5 years. This brings us back to the critical question: will economic growth for the broader population return? And if it doesn't, what then? Economists are sharply divided. The pessimists, led by Robert Gordon, believe that the potential for economic growth is now much lower than in the last century. In his book, The Rise and Fall of American Growth, he explains that the new industrial revolution may have given us the smartphone, but that hardly compares, in his thinking, to the great advances of the 20th century: electricity, the automobile, the airplane, movies, television, antibiotics. On the other hand, optimists like Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee tell us in their book, The